And today, delighted to give you a bit of an overview about what the distribution system is within the UK. Give a bit of a deeper dive down into the role of the distribution system operator, how we're changing, how our network is evolving, and how we're meeting the needs of our customers and stakeholders. And then we're going to take a bit of a deeper focus into how flexibility is working as one of the pinnacle technologies across our network, helping us work more agilely and responsive, being more responsive to consumer demands to minimize the expenditure on the network, but crucially allow all of our customers to do what they want to do in the future as they decarbonize heating and transport. Going to give you a little bit more detail about National Grid distribution itself. So, as I said, we are the largest distribution network in the UK. We're part of National Grid, which itself is the largest network owner in the UK. So we, as the transmission network owner, we operate all of the transmission infrastructure in England and Wales. And then as the distribution network owner, we operate all of the wires coming off of the transmission system down into homes and businesses across the Southwest, South Wales and the Midlands. So we distribute electricity across around 8 million endpoints and about 25 million customers. We have enough cable and overhead lines to take us around the world 3 times, and 190,000 substations. So a very large asset base that we need to own and operate. And then giving some background and some context to how this is evolving across the system, then we can see that the waves of electrification from EVs and the decarbonisation of transport, but also emerging decarbonisation of heat pumps connecting to our network, as well as decarbonisation of industry, is really driving a big change in how we need to meet the needs of our customers. And that's driving a big shift change in the amount of investment that we need to provide within the UK. So we, across our 5-year investment horizon, which we agree with the regulator, we are spending £7.5 billion on improving and running our network. Lots of that is devoted to creating new capacity on the network, so upgrading the transformers and wires, keeping them in a good, healthy condition, and bringing on new connections. In terms of the boundary of our responsibilities, then, as I said before, we take the distribution, we take the electricity off the transmission system, and flow that down through the distribution wires connected onto our network. This enables us to transfer electricity from the 400 kV and the 275 kV network all the way down through the voltage levels down to the 415, 230 volts that we see across our low voltage network into the homes and businesses that we support. And it's really important that we work in lockstep, not only with the consumers that connect to our network, but also across governments and communities to help us deliver some of those energy priorities. And we can see that our customers are significantly changing about how they interact with our network. So there is a big push for greater demand supplied by electricity across our region. Over the past couple of years, we've seen twice as many electric vehicle charge points connecting to our network as we have in the previous 2 years. So that is really starting to ramp up and see the improvements of decarbonised transport onto our network. But we're also seeing an upsurge in the amount of electric vehicles coming onto our network, the amount of heat pumps coming onto our network as well. And that is combined with us operating an aging asset base. And so we also need to keep the health and condition of our network. And that is leading to quite a lot of investment that we're placing in terms of replacing cables and upgrading those across our price control period. Well, it's not just the infrastructure that we look after, it's also the interface that we have with end consumers. So one of the changes that we've made recently is to digitize our processes, particularly with respect to allowing low carbon technologies to get connected onto our network. So our online online EV portal allows customers to go and get a acceptance of an electric vehicle charge point behind the meter within 2 seconds across our license areas. This has greatly reduced the burden that our customers need to provide that visibility about how they're interacting and using energy on our network. And that is driving a lot of improvements in terms of the digitalization interface with our consumers. And part of that digitalization interface is really helping us drive new capabilities across our network. So our system is changing. We are digitizing our infrastructure and improving the capability of our assets by leveraging some of that digitalization interface. So that enables us to have digital control of a number of our assets, not just in the substation, so controlling the feeders, controlling the automation on the main infrastructure on our network, but it also allows us to reach further with customers' permission behind the meter and start to signal to consumers when their consumption is most going to be beneficial to the network. And it's unlocking some of those markets around flexible system operation that is really helping us keep on top of some of the demand changes across our network, but also crucially allowing us to find new ways to be able to solve some of the potential constraints or constraints across our network in order to accelerate some of those connections and make sure that we're keeping on top of how we're serving those customers. And that is critical to how a distribution system operator operates differently to how a traditional DNO would do so. So we are coordinating with energy flows across the whole system, and that allows us to maximize the agility across the network, whilst also seeking new ways to keep the operation of the network financially efficient. We're also looking across the system and network planning role and enabling improved acceleration for some of the waves of growth around the electrification of heat and transport by providing better visibility about how we're changing and adapting our network into the future. So by forecasting out how we expect consumer demand to change, we are able to signal where our network is going to be improving, where the capacity is going to be growing, and ensuring that we can unlock further capacity for customers when they're going to need it across our network. But we're not just unlocking that capacity through conventional reinforcement and looking at how we do that for our customers. We're also looking at some of the non-wires alternatives that will allow us to be able to unlock flexibility and shifting of consumer demand to be able to provide additional headroom or footroom across our network. And using those commercial signals to be able to shape demand allows us to create new revenue opportunities for customers connecting onto our network, whilst also providing a very beneficial service to our network, allowing us to provide that capacity through to those customers. And in doing so, we have really established a ecosystem of sharing data across our network. So we have a lot of data about where capacity is available across our system, where low carbon technologies are connecting, and where generation is looking to connect. And we are flowing that information through and heavily supporting local communities and local governments to be able to develop local area energy plans. Having the visibility of a combined, a joined up picture about how local area energy plans are developing allows us to really demonstrate that we're unlocking capacity in the right areas and the right times for those customers, but also gives them certainty that they can get on and deliver some of the decarbonisation targets in their area, whilst being supported by the network. By working in lockstep with all those actors, we can ensure that our network drives the right performance and improvement for those consumers, whilst trying to do so at the minimum cost to all the customers within our region. Being able to work in lockstep is really important because there is a great deal of uncertainty across the uptakes of technology and where things are going to be developing up closest. So by sharing our plans transparently and ingesting the plans of others about how they expect to pivot around decarbonisation, we can really make sure we get after the transition in the electricity system in the most efficient and economic way. And this is the bedrock really to our approach to strategic investment. So we spend a lot of time and effort forecasting where we expect our network to grow. And we can only do so by engaging and talking to our stakeholders, understanding how industry, how business, how consumers are varying their adoption of different technologies, either to see how more efficient consumption within their homes and businesses is going to reduce the load so that we can share some of that capacity with other customers connecting onto the network, or by seeing where there's general growth across the network that across that consumer demand that will help drive some of the investment and making sure that we're targeting in the right area. To do so in a really prudent way, we look across the whole of our network, and we have a development plan that identifies all the future things that we could do in an area to unlock capacity. This allows us to look across multiple options about incremental build versus big strategic investment, and also non-wires alternatives, such as those I described around shaping consumer behavior through commercial signals, dynamic line ratings, real-time ratings of assets, and other operational technologies and smart grid technologies that we could use to provide capacity in an expedited way. And we consider all those on a single and identical basis, and that allows us to be able to really consider how we think best to go and target some of the improvements in providing capacity. So considering all of the most efficient options that might be available, and deciding how we manage to target that capacity in the most efficient way. And what we can see by doing a really good forecasting job, we can understand where the areas of growth and capacity is needed across our network. So on the left-hand side, we can see the electric vehicles and where they're most going to be concentrated today. And then we can look forward out to 2050 and in very individual different times slices and different scenarios to be able to understand where that growth is going to be clustered, allowing us to prioritize that. And in driving that strategic investment process, we can consider all the options, and we can look across all options equally and decide which is going to be the best option to be undertaken in that particular area. Is that going to be an incremental investment on a few assets? Is that going to be very big strategic and anticipatory investment in a particular region to unlock and advance capacity? Or is that going to be using non-wires alternatives to expedite some of that capacity in a more agile way, whilst we see the growth of the network, growth of the customer demand, and making sure that we're timing that in the right areas. And flexibility has a massive role in supporting some of the enhanced decision making that we can get at. So traditionally, it was a very binary decision to invest in the network. We had to look at how our network was performing and then decide when our network was going to be at capacity and then reinforce conventionally. And that allowed big chunks of capacity to be provided, but it's very capital intensive and it takes a long time to prepare and to respond to that growth. What we have now with flexibility is that we can continue accepting connections onto our network as the growth builds out in a very incremental way as we see consumer behavior change. We can use flexibility to consider our options and see how that growth is forming, whether it's clustered in a particular area, and see how the trajectory is ramping upwards. And then we can decide when to trigger further reinforcement or further options later on down the line. So flexibility really buys us that option value and allows us to efficiently invest into the network. So we now run a very deep flexibility market across our network. We've got a number of zones where we've identified that we need this particular service, and we're seeking services of generation, of EVs, of heat pumps, of energy storage, to be able to shift and alter their demand through a various different products that are shaped to that particular consumer behavior. And in doing so, we provide financial revenues either directly to end consumers or through aggregators, suppliers and marketplaces to be able to tailor those revenues best to get the flexibility harnessed to improve our network. One of the big changes that we've made recently is launching our market gateway. This allows that commercial qualification of all of those flexibility services to be done through a digital channel, and it allows customers to be able to log onto a market gateway, see what revenue opportunities there might be available, commercially qualify through that particular route, and then technically qualify their assets, understand what trades and flexibility opportunities might be available to them, commit to those trades, and then flow that through into delivery. Customers can either, customers, suppliers, and aggregators can either directly use our market gateway, which is the interface to the market, or they can go through other marketplaces and exchanges. So we recently launched a strategic partnership with Picklo. We also work with Electron, another marketplace within the UK, to enable more participation in those flexibility markets. And finally, the most important thing is how we bring that through to the market. So our distribution network options assessment sets out a very clear trajectory of where we're going to be developing capacity on our network, whether that is going to be a traditional reinforcement or whether that's going to be a flexibility market opportunity. Where it's a flexibility market opportunity, we set out expectations for how much flexibility we might need, what the revenue ranges of those flexible assets might be able to achieve in those areas, and also the timescales for where we think that is going to be most efficient and most economic to use flexibility in those areas. This transparency provides huge revenue opportunities for the flexibility markets to really develop and provide alternatives to conventional reinforcement across the whole of our network area. And in doing so in such a transparent way and by harnessing a deep market, we've been able to really unlock some particular benefits for our customers. So we've been able to secure over 20 gigawatt hours worth of flexibility through contracts, and really surfacing the most high quality flexibility that we know is going to be available so that we can use that across our network. We've dispatched that in the past 12 months, over 17,000 times, 17,000 individual flexibility activations. That has allowed us to bring that flexibility on and shape the load across our area to be able to provide the maximum amount of capacity back out to new customers and to defer and avoid that investment. And in deferring and avoiding that investment, not only have we been able to share some of the revenue opportunities for flexibility participation through to those individuals providing those services to us, but we've also been able to defer wider capital investment that we would otherwise have had to make onto our network in around 136 different network zones. And that has avoided and deferred £80 million worth of capital expenditure that otherwise we would have had to add on to individual customer bills, to really driving those consumer value proposition back to our customers. So really glad to be able to give a bit of a background to National Grid electricity distribution, what we're doing within the UK, how we're developing our network using the needs of meeting the needs of stakeholders, but also how we're getting at and unlocking that value to use flexibility to provide revenues either through to the flexibility market or through to all consumers by using flexibility as one of the key points in the tools, key tools in our tool chain to be able to provide that capacity out to customers. So delighted to be able to share that with you, and we'll be very happy to take any questions or clarifications from how we're getting at flexibility.
Thank you for that session, Ben, and apologies for all the technical difficulties this morning. I just wanted to jump in with one question of my own, and then we have an audience question as well, if you don't mind. The UK's government goal has been to decarbonise the power sector by 2035, but many doubt that that will now be achievable. What are your views on that, and how close do you think we'll get to the target?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, Jordan. There's been a lot of, I think, fear and uncertainty and doubt of, how ready the electrical networks and the electricity system is to be able to support that decarbonisation. But I think I'd like to point back to all the excellent progress that the electricity system has made over the past decade in terms of pushing towards a decarbonised future. Much of the carbon emission reductions that we've seen in the UK have actually come from the decarbonisation of the electricity sector. So I think that we've got quite a good history of making improvements on there. That has been well supported though by government, and I think what's been really, I think, comforting and promising for us is that we can recognise that where we can work together across industry and across governments and across consumers and businesses, we can really make some big changes. So we've seen a great development of the solar sector within the UK. The UK's wind sector is also very leading across the field, and we've got some concrete plans now to take that forward to try and meet a fully decarbonised energy system. We're starting to see a lot of that growth now on the distribution networks right at the lowest, and seeing more things connecting onto our network, and we're very much getting at that challenge about providing the capacity. So the overarching message that I like to provide is that for any customer within our region, they shouldn't have to worry about whether there's enough capacity, because we will make that happen.
It's a discussion I had at the weekend, funnily enough. I live and breathe this industry, and it's one that, we might not make the goal 100%, but we're making good progress, and we should strive for as much progress as we can make without focusing so much on, yes, we might miss the goal, but let's not give up. Right, we do have one question from the audience, which is, sorry if you've covered this already, Ben, but how much of a role will demand-side response technologies play in grid balancing and achieving net zero in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, a massive role, really, and that can't be understated. And I think that role sort of splits into two, really. One is if we just have unabated consumption, we could see some very high peaks. That means that we'd have to put a lot of capital investment onto the network to be able to meet those peaks, and we'd actually run a very underutilized and inefficient network. So we should definitely be making sure that all of the technologies that we're connecting onto the network are flexible and can respond to some of these signals, to avoid either the additional network investment, but also the additional generation investment that would be needed to sit behind that. If we can really harness demand-side response technologies, then it also helps us shape the load into a much more manageable profile that allows to improve the utilization across the whole system. So we know that renewables are going to be intermittent, and we're going to see gluts of cheap and green electricity that are very low cost, And then we might see times when the energy is a lot more expensive because we're having to rely on other technologies to be able to provide that. Demand side response, and doing so in an automated way that isn't manual and reliant on and the end consumers doing a thing. Demand side response can help shift some of the most flexible consumption into the windows which that electricity would be most readily and efficiently and economically provided back to those consumers. So, whilst we're under no illusion that we need to build out infrastructure across our network, then we should be building out a flexible and smart system to be able to harness that and get the best benefits out. So I definitely think that flexibility is one of the hidden pillars of the energy transition that we really should be championing more.
100%. I know we've run out of time, but I just want to quickly, if you don't mind, ask you two more questions, which we've just had a flood of questions from the audience. Would you know how aligned the UK is with other large economies, such as the USA, Canada, European countries, and Asia?
Yeah, so as National Grid, we also own two electricity and gas distributions out in New England and New York, and across as a DSO, and as a leading DSO, we have quite a large sphere of influence across other countries. Lots of interactions there. I think from a smart grid and smart systems perspective, the UK really is one of the leading jurisdictions in that area. We've been very well supported by our regulator, who has quite an aggressive approach to providing innovation funding, but also incentives across the regulatory area to be able to drive companies to make the right decisions in smart grid technologies. And we can certainly see that the UK is very much leading into that. In terms of other jurisdictions, we see that there is the same sort of challenges, but they each have their own kind of individual feel. So, in Australia, lots more embedded domestic solar behind the meter. We're starting to see particular areas of the US also lead in terms of EVs and connections. And then across Europe, there's some real good examples of where decarbonisation of heat is really going at pace. But I think we're doing quite well within the UK too.
And countries have to play to their geographic strengths. We're an island, so wind is perfect for us. Is there a worry about hacking into the network/system and disrupting suppliers, and what measures are being taken to avoid this?
Yes, it's a really good point. As we start to make the energy system, the electricity system, more digitally enabled, you also open up to a wider range of potential malicious actions that otherwise you might have been able to avoid in a much simpler system. But as companies, we're all sort of quite aware of the cyber threat, and that goes from financial institutions all the way through to the electricity system. So there's been a lot of work done, particularly by government, to make sure that companies are really taking this seriously. We've got the NIS regulations that are sort of ensure that we've got the right amount of security, and we're taking the right preparations to not only be responsive and reactive to those threats, but also proactively look for those threats and close them down across our system. What we would see is that as the system becomes more decentralized, yes, you expose yourself to a wider potential for malicious actions in third parties, but through a decentralized system, you also get that resilience that you're not all sort of reliant on a single centralized body. And so pushing more of our intelligence out to the grid edge and providing more resilience in deeper and more embedded systems of operation across our network will really improve resilience and make sure that we can still keep abreast of how the network's developing.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. We are actually going to be talking a bit more about digitalization in the next session. So really appreciate that session. And once again, apologies for all the technical difficulties, but we got there in the end.
Very much delighted to be here today.
Thank you.